Hello, everybody. Welcome to The Revolution Will Not Be Televised. It will be streamed. This is a conversation about life and leadership in the digital world. I'm your host, Dr. RickyAllmon, along with my fellow host, Reverend StephenThurston. We don't do co-hosts unless we have guests on, like our beautiful guest that we have on today. Just in case you're wondering who this visual podcast is for, I'm so glad you asked. It's for pastors, entrepreneurs, consultants, digital content creators, influencers of all types, corporate executives, educators, and as my brother StephenThurston says, Lottie Dottie and everybody. But here's the purpose of this conversation, a threefold purpose. Number one, we want to help you to maximize your potential. Number two, we want you to mobilize for your purpose. And number three, we want you to multiply your productivity. That means whatever you're doing, we want you to blow that thing up so that it can become everything that you want it to be. Stephen, what's going on, man? Good to see you.
Good to see you too, Rick. Hope that your day, your week has been an amazing week, man. A lot happening, and always excited to connect on Saturdays with you. We talk all through the week.
We do. And I don't want to blow up your spot, man, but you just made another year.
Yes, sir. Thank you, man.
So listen, hold on. Let me pause here because this is a first on this podcast. We're actually celebrating the first time we're celebrating the birthday of one of the hosts on the podcast. I need you all right now to blow his Cash App up. He just made 18. So blow him up. Come on now, give him some money. Just help him out. He's a struggling preacher, and he needs some help. But no, seriously, y'all, if you've been enjoying the content you're getting here, and of course on his platform with his Mirror Moment movement, just show him some love, some appreciation. He actually made me do this. No, I'm just playing. No. But no, seriously, man, I'm so glad you're on the planet, sir. As I told you when we talked early in the week, and we celebrate you today, thanking God that you've lived another year and you've survived this pandemic. So, but I'm excited to get into this show. Who are our guest co-hosts today? I said this is Queendom Day. Queenology is in effect. So tell us who our guest is. You better introduce them right, because they gonna come for you. So it's gonna be some price. It's gonna be some heat in the room.
Yes, sir. Well, we're excited. We have the opportunity to share this platform, which I appreciate you being open to sharing this, Rick, with other people who are subject matter experts. I mean, we have our own lanes where we win, but it's always good to bring other people in who are winning.
Most definitely.
To expand what we know, what we do, and how we do it. And I've got two amazing friends. One is family, like literally. The other one, she's kind of inched her way into his family. But my cousin, Don Smith, is here. Don represents Lockheed Martin as their corporate EEO investigator.
Wow.
So for those of you all who don't know what I just said, you think I just spoke Greek, French, Hebrew, don't worry about it. We're going to break all of that down, decompose it in a second. And then I've got Melissa Jones here. Melissa is an HR director. She's kind of navigated through every Fortune 500 international corporation there is. She runs the business for them and helps to staff them and secure the people that work in those entities. And it's important that we hear their voice, number one, because they're subject matter experts, they're professionals, they're women, and they're black, and they're proud of who they are.
Wait, you need to say that again. They're subject matter experts. They're women.
They're black, and they're proud of who they are.
Yes, sir.
Demonstrated in the work that they do and what they seek to translate in these spaces called corporate America. Today, we're focused in, for those of you who are curious about what we're talking about, what our angle is, what our lens is. We're looking at the rat race and race within the rat race, how race impacts the corporate American space. And so we wanted to hear their voice, hear their lens, because of the work that they do in that space, help to give some clarity as to what's really happening behind those glass doors and how we can better equip our people to be prepared to deal with race in that rat race.
Hold on, Stephen. Before we get into this conversation, I need to ask everybody watching to do something. I need everybody to tag at least three other purposeful, productive, and powerful women of color that you know. I need everybody, not everybody, everybody. Need y'all to do this right now. Share this on your platform. If you're on Facebook, put it on your timeline. Start a watch party. Start a Saturday girls brunch thing because all y'all don't need to be trying to go to eat if you're in Chicago on Rush anyway in the middle of the street. So just go ahead and have a brunch at home virtually. Let's do it like that. But yeah, go ahead and tag three women that are purposeful, productive, powerful. Let them know this conversation is about them. This conversation is for them. And we want their input. As Melissa and Dawn are sharing with us and giving us tools that we need to navigate these corporate spaces, we want your input as well. So go ahead and tag somebody, share this so that we can get into this conversation. Stephen, I'm so ready for this, man. Do I have the honor of starting the conversation?
Go ahead, man.
Dawn and Melissa, again, thank you for being here and thank you for sharing in the distinct honor of being Howardites, Bisons. Yes. Hold on. They got to get some of this. Let me give y'all. Yeah. We starting like that today. So I'm gonna just put it out there since we here.
Go downhill quick, Rick.
Yeah, I can tell, but I'm going with it. How has the concept of D&I, diversity and inclusion, failed our black women in the corporate space? Let's just go there because they try to make it diverse, but we don't see a whole lot of inclusivity. They'll bring different hues of brown and black to the table, but it doesn't always come including the influence and the voice that you ought to have when you get to the table. So let's talk about that. How has D&I failed the black professional woman in the corporate space?
Don, you want to? Doesn't matter. I'll take it. So I think, it's failed us in the corporate space because we are now expected to shoulder um, the diverseness of all women of color.
Mm.
I think what is challenged because in my previous employer, which is a Fortune 500 company, I was the co-founder of a Women of Color ERG, which is an employee resource group. And what we quickly realized is that we are now working with every group that is considered women of color, Asian, Latinx, everybody under the spectrum. And we missed the mark, or they may have changed since then, but we've missed the mark of really catering to Black women who I think in particular have, we are different. Our challenges are different. They are not the same. And so when you start to group all those women together, you start to glaze over what our challenges and what our issues are. And I think that is one way that D&I has the concept, and I think the problem is that it's a concept in and of itself. But that's where I believe that the concept of D&I has failed us. Also, um, D&I is a corporate responsibility.
Okay.
It's where everybody now, especially, wants to play in this space, but you have to have alignment, you have to have support, you have to have a champion. Your leaders have to lead; they have to walk the walk and talk the talk. And oftentimes, there is a person who's head of D&I who has no influence or power. It is a lot of idea generation, but there is not a lot of execution. And so when you don't have that accountability from the most senior level to actually make a change or make an impact, it falls flat many times. So
Wow.
I don't know, Don.
Well, I'll say a few things. I'll say first, diversity and inclusion are not should not be lumped together. They're two separate things. When you're talking about diversity, you're actually talking about numbers. When you're talking about inclusion, you're talking about impact. And so you're talking about intentionality
Whoa, whoa, whoa,
about
whoa. I need you to say that one more time, Dawn.
okay.
When you're
When you're
talking about
talking
diversity.
about diversity, you're talking about numbers.
Okay.
Okay, data drives everything in business environments, right? When you're talking about inclusion, while they're often housed together, they're very different concepts. Inclusion about intentionality.
No, you're
and
good.
bringing your authentic self to work, right? So when we're talking about how we have missed the mark, we're talking about intentional opportunities for women of color in two ways. One, hiring. Two, to stay promotable. And three, to be able to work in a work environment that, that is all encompassing around respect, ERGs, and things like that. You often have ERGs that are specific to women in general, and then you have ERGs that are specific to people of color in general. But what you don't have, which is really, when we talk about ERGs, it's like an internal professional organization. What we really need are intentional organizations around women of color, and to not be ashamed to be able to call it that. While it is important for us to be on platforms like Women's Action Network, and overall professional organizations where you have like the Organization of Women Engineers, you got to take it a step further, a layer down. Black women. So specific ERGs or specific professional organizations for Black women to give things like mentoring, professional development, networking environments where you don't feel, the intimidation layer is not there.
Right.
Because it makes it different to climb, we say corporate ladders. I hate to say that, but you don't work to not advance, right? So if you're working in a corporate environment, you want to grow, you want to expand, you want to get that bag, you want to, bring folks under your wing, you want to give back. There's so many things that we want to do, but you have to be at the table to be able to do that.
Exactly.
And if you're not on the golf course, right? If you're not invited to the the VIP parties at the Action Network,
The house in the Hamptons.
if you're not there,
Right.
then you don't get that opportunity for substantive mentoring so that you can grow. So I think inside and outside, because it's not just within your company, outside is more important, because when you hit a ceiling in your company, then there are others where a phone call can be made, or you can be given a lead, or to work similar to my current position. I was pulled in by a former colleague into a very rare leadership structure where it was predominantly African American women.
Wow.
So that is an anomaly, right? It's like a unicorn. It doesn't happen. But what I have seen happen in my career that I've never seen before are executive VPs, multiple EVPs that are Black women that say, "Hey, I'm going to pull your coattail. I want you to draft out a path of where you want to go. And when opportunities come, I'm going to shoot it to you." I'm not that they're giving me, anything that I'm not qualified for, but the networking and putting you on sort of an upward trajectory so that you can get the training that you need, the credentials that you need to be an EVP, senior management, or whatever the case. That's intentionality. That is inclusion, and that's how we create it.
So they're giving you opportunity by access.
Yes.
Right, because the issue.
From us.
Right.
From us, by us, and if it's not an intentional house, so to speak, think of an ERG or a professional organization as a house for us to build, to grow, to develop, to be able to talk about barriers and how to, sort of polish your professional persona. It's things that we have to talk about with us
Thanks
that
for
other
the plug,
folks
girl.
that folks can't talk about with us. You
Right,
understand?
right.
You talk about the Crown Act that was actually passed for Black women, that kind of the language is around the hair that grows out of our skull. You
Mm.
understand? However it comes out, right? That's a very real issue.
Yeah.
And who you think we can talk about that at the Women's Action Network?
And I think that's also important because, and I often tell people they need multiple mentors. I think you need, as a Black woman, you need a white woman mentor. You need a Black woman mentor. You need multiple mentors because the advice that your white mentor may give you, you have to tweak that because they are giving that advice to you from their lens and what has worked in their favor. That is not always translatable in how I am able to utilize that advice. So then I need to be able to go back and say, okay, this is how I have been directed. How, as a dark skinned Black woman who is very secure in information from one source because it's not always relatable. So you need multiple mentors.
There's a second piece to this that I don't want to miss when we talk about failures, and it doesn't differ a lot than kind of where we fail from a global perspective. Racial discrimination in the workplace is the most prominent form of racism in this country by sheer numbers, because you have 162 million working Americans in this country. So by virtue of numbers alone, racial discrimination in the workplace is the most prominent form of racism. So when you talk about how we address racism, we have to have allies. We have to have race, the issue of race, particularly as it relates to Black people, because what happens in the diversity sort of dialogue or narrative, Black folks often get lost because it's the idea of what brings everyone to the table, right? But then what happens in this work is that you have an industry that's made up primarily of Black folks trying to dismantle racism in companies in America. Got me? Okay. So we had to have the issues relating to Black people be more important to everyone. So, for example, I'm going to share the story with you, and I cannot discuss the name of this particular organization that is committed to being full diversity partners, but it is ran by all white men. And when we have these issues of race and we're asking people to do two things, we're saying we don't want to change, this is just diversity in general, we don't want to change your mind, we just want to let you know what's prohibited at work. That's a flawed argument. We want to change your mind and we want to let you know what's prohibited at work. But if you have me standing in front of a group of all white senior executive male leaders,
Wow,
asking them to question and check their bias at the table versus their counterparts,
Sure.
asking them to have that conversation, the things you will hear and see them say in front of their own folks versus putting on the mask for us is how we break through. And that is a hard thing for Black folks to do and to see. We know the idea of what some of that hate looks like, but when it's spoken or when it's posted around the room, it is a terrifying experience, right? And so I say all of that to say we have to. This is the hard work. To have a real impact, we have to have allies in others that don't look like us. But when you talk about the Black and white racial paradigm, we have to be allies with each other to really break down some of these barriers.
So would you say that all of this hashtag Black Lives Matter from the corporate space is more pandering than pivoting?
it's a good question.
I say follow the money. Seriously, people can make statements, and I think with well intention, but at the end of the day, many of these corporations are watching their bottom line, and if there's an impact to stock, if there's an impact to their overall bottom line, they are more inclined to make changes. And so I always say follow the dollar. So I think to some degree there is pandering, but I think that there has to be some sort of barrier of breakage, right? So I think that this is a great opportunity in time, whereas if before it wasn't a comfortable conversation to bring up, because I don't know why saying Black automatically brings this anxiety to people. I have done it in some Black, like I don't get it. So I think this is a prime opportunity for us to break the barrier of conversation, to make
Melissa,
some hopeful change and impact. Yes.
Who's in the space that the company comes out, they put this, we're going to give $150 million to diversity, inclusion, HBCUs. Who's in that space that's holding them accountable for what they put out on Twitter or in their press conference?
It varies. Dawn might be one.
Yeah, so Don, break down what you do. I gave the Greek
Oh
and the
yes,
Hebrew
tell her what you
your
do.
job. Tell us what you actually
Yes,
do in that place.
exactly.
So, what I actually do is investigate claims of discrimination and harassment. And I also respond to claims against the company as it relates to discrimination and harassment. That's one piece of the investigative work that I do. The other piece is from a global diversity and inclusion perspective that has a programmatic approach to do some of the proactive things we need to do. So, for example, people who have experienced sexual assault, sexual harassment, race harassment, not just things like, so discrimination and harassment are a little different. Harassment are things like comments, like calling people the N word. And believe it or not, we have not uh, graduated beyond that.
Wow.
While racism is systemic, um, the hatred, the race hate, really it's a thing. And it's not just against people of color. It is overwhelmingly bold against women, primarily in the field of engineering, because it is traditionally a male dominated industry. And so when you have women entering the workforce as leaders, particularly, where they are giving directives and leading teams of people who have been building wartime material for 30 years. Imagine the dynamics that plays in. And of course, we have locations globally, but think about in the backwoods of Texas or Mississippi, and you have these, well-educated young women coming into the workforce, and let them be Black, and let them be engineers, or let them be MBA holders, or let them be attorneys trying to come in, to give directives. So that is kind of what heightens the activity around harassment in the workplace against women. As it relates to people of color and the Black Lives Movement, that has incited a spike in race harassment claims, I would say, over the past, at least since this current administration. What has happened is that, I'll frame it this way. Race hate that had gone more discreet since the early 80s, I'll say. There was an uptick, right? We knew it happened, but people would say things at home that they wouldn't dare come to work and say. Now, since the current administration, they're emboldened to come back and say those things that we haven't heard in 30 years. People be emboldened enough to say. So when we had a t-shirt war where you had folks wearing Black Lives Matter apparel, albeit a mask or albeit a shirt or whatever the case may be, and you had complaints against them as terrorists, right?
Wow.
What?
And then Wow. So then you have this piece where there was a push for folks to wear the Confederate as a part of their heritage to represent their position. So we had sort of this t-shirt war going on. And that's where the challenge comes from: being Black, being blackety Black, okay? And having to maintain neutrality.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I reached out to Stephen and I said, I don't know how much more of this I can take. Meaning, you have to play the middle of the road, and it does mature you in a way that nothing else will.
Right.
Because you know what my position is on the issues.
Right.
But if someone of a different persuasion strongly believes that the Confederate represents their heritage, and I have to be neutral, then I only compromise my neutrality to explain that there's also terror attached to that, right? Not to strip away what their beliefs around it are, but even that's hard for me to say. It's hard for me to say. But in order to move beyond, in order to expand the perception of both sides, because even for myself, I have a dear friend in Atlanta, dear friend, who many years ago during my time at Howard tried to explain to me the significance of the Confederacy and the Confederate flag for Southerners. And when I tell you, I argued that man down with all of my being at my 21-year-old bullhorn student government hat on. And then here I am at 40.
But you didn't, because he was a Morehouse guy, right?
Yeah, he know, I don't know what they doing at Morehouse. I wanted to transfer both of y'all to Howard, okay? Because you were just lost in the sauce down in Atlanta. I digress, okay? But here I am at 40, having to really sit and listen to what that represents for a white male, which is a little bit different than his perspective. Giving some credence to that because that is his honest, bona fide position. And being secure enough in the narrative around that in terms of the terror against Black folks. And I'm not even extending to Native Americans. I can't even get that deep. But to explain how that also incites terror for another group of people, right? So then the argument against that is, well, when I see this BLM attire at work, then that incites terror for them because, say, their son is a police officer or whatever the case may be. I say all that to say, this is why it's important to have allies. This is why it's important to remain educated around it so that you can have a balanced approach in dealing with it and resolving it professionally. But you know what that does personally?
Here's the thing. I think, Dawn, as one woman in one organization doing the one work that you do, if you just think about the other millions of organizations that does not have this representation. And so here you see the issue. Here is the uphill battle that we have when we need more people multiplied by how many of Dawn to do the work.
Somebody just said, come on, Mama Dawn.
So, and honestly, Dawn's position is not replicated in many other organizations.
Right.
So you have people, back to Stephen's point of who holds this, who's accountable. You have many different people accountable. I've seen in organizations where you have a finance person accountable for this. And you then ask yourself, well, how really are they making an impact and a difference?
Right.
And therefore, you have this continual perpetuated issue of not being checked, of this not being important enough, of this not being, of leaders not being accountable to the issues. And therein lies the problem. And so you see this uptick. If you go on LinkedIn, you see this uptick of D&I or I&D or whatever they're calling it, professionals, because now organizations are realizing our finance person or our secretary can't be the gatekeeper and the holder and the executor of our D&I strategy. And so that's part of my responsibility now. It's funny because in my organization, we had a global D&I head who quit after 6 months. So that should be telling.
Wow.
About who was responsible. I work in a global organization. We have 20,000 people around the globe. We operate in every major country. And the global D&I quit after 6 months. Because what we're finding out is that when they are putting this on the table, they're slapping this title and this responsibility on someone, but they are not accountable to the outcome.
Wow.
And so that's why I say follow the money, because companies put money where it's important.
Right.
And not only follow the money, you also have to follow the retention. So it's one thing to donate because it's easy to, throw a bag at BLM, or it's easy to throw a bag at NAACP and say, let them work out their issue.
Sure.
But it's different to have someone committed to making the change within your organization. And so you have to look at the retention numbers. Are Black people leaving your organization in droves?
Yes.
Why? Are you feeling included in any major decisions? Are there any Black people at your seniorship level? And we also have to think, if there is a Black person at a senior leadership level, what is and who do they turn to? And for help them to gird them up to also make some impactful change.
Right.
And so the accountability question is one that's still out there. It still hasn't been solved, because people just haven't bought onto it yet. So hopefully the finance person is not making the changes in your organization, but that is where we need to gird up these companies. And, I often call myself a sacrificial lamb, because you go into these organizations and you want out. You're like, just like you said, Dawn, how long can I do this? It is costly to your mental, to your person and your being. Wow. And so often I consider myself a sacrificial lamb because I take the hit. And that often could be, I'm not invited, or I'm not promoted, or I'm not that. But I can know I can lay my head at home every night that I have done something impactful, not only for myself, but for the people behind me and around me. So
Melissa, because I know you and I know you're a Black Panther undercover, how do you balance this piece of being assertive in the workplace but not coming across as angry?
listen, it has taken work. Um, it is taking stepping on some nails. Let me tell you, I now my approach differs depending on who I'm speaking to. It's a lot about knowing your audience as well. Mm-hmm. But in general, I feed pepper with honey, and so because we do ourselves and our fellow Black people a disservice by not stepping into the issue and doing something about it. So you cannot skirt around it. But I think, unfortunately, how I say it and what I say is not always adhered to. It's not always received well because of who it's coming from. So I've learned to I learned to feed pepper with honey in short. But I have been, when I moved to Texas, my boss called me, who lived in Chicago at the time, and was like, we know that you're from New York. But what the feedback that I'm getting, and he told me this in my review, is that, you need to curtail your communication, your delivery.
Wow.
And my first question was, what's my merit increase? Like, is this going to impact my dollars? Because we can work on that later. What's my merit? And I said, okay. And over the years, I have gotten that. And my question to myself has always been, do you want to be impactful, or do you feel like yourself want to be right? And so I've had to always, as I'm delivering messages, as I'm challenging people, my goal is always to be impactful, to disrupt. So sometimes that does not always come out like how I'm coming out here. It is depending on my delivery. It depends on my audience.
So you're really making a choice between being heard and making a significant contribution to the matter on the table versus being accepted.
Yes.
Because both ways have consequences, right? I mean, being
Always
heard hopefully will lead to something evolutionary. Being accepted, may mean you move a little faster and go a little farther. So that's gotta, I'm sure that's a burden within itself, as a Black woman, that I've got to choose. Like, you would think that because I have something significant to add to this conversation that's going to advance the trajectory of our company, that in itself should merit a promotion, should merit a wage increase. I mean, everybody else gets it for that. If you were another hue, another culture, they'd be like, oh, Melissa, thank you so much. Thank you for bringing those thoughts to the table.
But I think that kind of goes to my initial point about being intentional. Two things for me. I have not grown up to that level yet, where I am fighting pepper with honey. I am fighting pepper with concrete. And the best way I have been able to equip myself in the environment is to always have, and this is what keeps me up at night, to have data supporting my position. Okay. Right? Because in corporate environments, particularly Fortune 500 company, that's how you grasp attention. You don't grasp the attention with passion. You don't even grasp the attention with narrative facts alone.
You bring the numbers.
You bring the numbers to the table.
Right.
And it is similar to the way a preacher does, right? He can introduce a text and then be all over the place with whatever the sermon is going to be about, right?
That's another podcast, Dawn. Watch yourself now. Watch yourself. Watch yourself.
Look, I can go there. But I say that to say, I am very mindful that I have a very direct and assertive tone. And I have come to embrace that about myself. I also infuse, because I work for, and I'll say two things. Being frustrated, Melissa, is what led me to a company that I feel has the gold standard. It doesn't mean that we get it right every time, but it means that the money backs up the intentionality. The support is
So
there.
hold on. Don't go so fast past that point, Dawn, because, and I think Melissa was speaking to that as well. That's the critical key.
Mm-hmm.
Money has got to match mission.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't say this is what we want to do.
That is a fact.
If you're not putting the capital, because I mean, I don't want to go churchy or preachy, but money answereth all things. Money is the clapback.
So it's two things though in that. The reality is when folks feel that they have been discriminated against or harassed at work, they have two options. They can go external to the company to try to resolve it, or they can resolve it internally, right? However, the way the law is set up, if a person goes externally and they never gave the company the opportunity to investigate, the courts are going to send them right back to the company to deal with it anyway. So let's just break this down a little bit. If I believe I'm being discriminated against based upon my race, I don't trust anybody in my company. I don't even want to talk to them. I go directly to the EEOC or the state version of that, which in Illinois is the Illinois Department of Human Rights. It's going to cost you nothing to file a complaint with those entities other than your patients and your nerves, because they are governmental entities investigating a matter, but they do. So that is your first sort of recourse. Well, it's the second. Now, if you get to the stage where you're in court and the judge asks, has this person filed it internally? Meaning, has the company been given the opportunity to respond to this claim of discrimination? And if the answer is no, then the judge is just going to bounce you right back to the company to do that. So oftentimes company will hire external counsel or some sort of independent attorney or investigator to do that. So they have their affirmative offense in court. But if you deal with it internally and you force the company to deal with it internally, that's where you see real results. Where you should see real results. If you've been discriminated against, that person, you talk about consequences, you talk about suspension, you talk about termination. That's also where a company can show you how serious they are about resolving issues of racism and discrimination.
So let me make a quick
not
pivot.
many are.
Let me make a quick pivot here. For both Dawn and Melissa, from your corporate lenses, what's more at play, or what percentages would you give to these three things? Racism, ageism, sexism. From your corporate lens, which of these three, and I know they're all there and they're all significant, but give percentages to them and speak to sort of the pecking order, if you please, of how you see them manifest.
I'll give this a shot, Melissa. Mm-hmm. In terms of the pecking order per se, I think you have your issues surrounding gender and harassment and discrimination in pay, things like that around women, sort of in the hierarchy of the pecking order, primarily because issues of discrimination, again, we're talking about, actual tangible job benefits that are being removed from a person or denied of a person. They're not getting hired, they're not getting promoted, or they're not getting the opportunity. When you talk about that over the past 20 years, that has sort of the issues around gender and sexism, as you're labeling it, has taken a priority, only because when you see more often, when you see issues of race, it has come out in the form of harassment, where people are being called names, or it's not enough of us in the workplace to have discrimination issues in pay. It's not enough of us in leadership where, our salaries are being questioned. So I'll say they all, honestly, it's hard to say percentages because you're talking about an entire, it depends on the industry.
I understand.
Depends on
right.
Geographic location.
Right.
But I think the issues around women have been a safer topic for discussion. Mm-hmm. Everybody has a mother, everybody has a sister who's gone to college they're proud of, they want the best for her. Women have been very vocal over the past 20 years around issues of discriminatory behavior in the workplace. Whereas post-civil rights movement, you see less around issues of race. You see this uptick in respectability politics because people think we're past harassment when we're not past that, right? So the institutional barriers against women, the institutional barriers against Black folks, the institutional barrier against people over 40 or more seasoned in the workplace when you're pushing innovation. Innovation doesn't always connect to age, but some way it does because you have a lot of money around recruiting. You have a lot of money invested in these college sort of training centers where they're pulling talent, and your retired workforce often gets ignored when it comes to skill development or promotability. You talk about image politics in terms of the face of the company. So, you know, they're all very important issues. And I think the issues of race now, what I like about the Black Lives Matter movement, what I like that it has done, it has brought back the safe spaces for us to really discuss the underbelly, the absolute ugliness and hate that most people say, oh, it just happens out there. Where people are now saying, you know, we need to be cognizant about what's happening around folks of color, right? So I think that's what the Black Lives Matter movement has done. We're not talking about it from a civil rights perspective. I think that has just dominated the conversation, right? You hear things about, you know, Dr. King. I mean, you hear the most, and I'm not saying that's ridiculous, but that's a lot of people's point of reference for the race problem. It's civil rights, right? And, you know, burning crosses and people calling, they don't call folks the N-word at work anymore. They absolutely do. So it has forced us to begin to have that ugly conversation that respectability politics will want you to think because we're dressed up in suits, right? And we have college degrees. And because we're here at the table, we must not have a race issue here. You understand? But we only have 3 CEOs in all the Fortune 500 companies. We have 3 CEOs that are Black.
Yep. So let me ask, Melissa, you gonna respond to that?
No, I think Dawn touched on it. You know, I think the one thing I will add, especially around one, I think industry also matters, right? So Dawn is in an engineering type field. I've been in beauty for the last almost 10 years. And it is particularly different how you have to address and assess, I will say. I would love to meet Pepper with concrete. Because that is my natural inclination to do that. But and I love that. But what I have learned in the beauty space, because it is an emotional space, that you have to, and that's why I think knowing your audience is very important. It is very different in how you have to communicate to be impactful. And that is always the goal, to be impactful. But I think especially for women, in terms of lens, racism, sexism, ageism, you know, the one thing about Black women that I will add is that we are not able to disconnect any of those. I think where we are double and triple taxed, right, where we are not able to play those same games as even our Black male counterparts. So I think, you know, when we are talking about those classifications of ageism, sexism, racism, that, you know, Black women are double and triple taxed. That's all I want.
Yeah, that's a fact.
Yeah, I would, and it was interesting because when I just look at the landscape of what Black women face, professional Black women in the corporate space, it seems as if, like you said, there was this undue burden that you all carry. At the same time, I was careful not to conflate it, right? And just say, okay, these all have equal parts, but I can only imagine it's actually magnified. And whatever burden even Stephen and I would carry in a corporate space as Black males, it pales in comparison to exactly what you all come in with, you know, because all I have to do is cut all my hair off. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? And now listen, you all have to go in.
Say this.
Go ahead.
I was in a room with my leader at the time, and I use leader very subjectively at the time, and she was giving coaching to a woman And we're sitting there, and she said, when I was first starting out my career, this is a Latinx as well. So
Okay.
understand, my leader's Latinx. She's giving advice to another Black woman. I'm sitting in the room, and she said, when I was starting out my career, I was working in finance, and I would come in with my hair all big, and I had on hoops.
Wow.
And my leader at the time said, less is more. I am sitting at the end of the table. My hair is very curly when it's natural. And I have on hoops probably the size of Dawn's. And these are the microaggressions or the blatant aggressions that we are facing. And so I'm sitting there listening to her tell this story. And once she's done, I say to her, and this is where my little honey comes in with Pepper. I said, well, I'm so glad we're 20 years advanced of that. We don't have to deal with that anymore. And I think that is where we have to inject ourselves at every single stance. Because not only do I have to protect myself as a woman with big old curly hair and earrings in this juncture, but I have to protect and start to challenge her stereotype of what is professional or what is not professional and how we show up to the workplace. So I just wanted to inject that when you said cut your hair off. I'm like, here I am sitting here with this head full of curly hair and these hoop earrings, and you're going to tell a story about how less is more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Girl, bye.
So I've heard this phraseology over the past several years that the future is female. Do you think the future is female? And if so, what should our expectations be of this future of female?
Is it white female? Like, what do we?
That phrase has come from different genres of people.
Yeah, you're hearing it in different circles. The future is female.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I want the future to be fair. And I think it is a level of more female. Absolutely. I think that we have to be careful about where we say the future is female, because we can end up in more of the same. And so that question, I'm still trying to figure out exactly what that means to people. And Dawn, obviously you're going to have a perspective, but I think that, I think it should be more female. And I think the only way forward is fair and equitable. It should be more future of female. Definitely a change in what we have going on today. But I often question, I want to understand, because my girlfriend made this point of, what's the girl? Is it Candace
Owens?
Yes, she's female and she thinks she's the future. So we have to be careful about how we determine what is the future of female. So I go ahead, though.
First of all, the future is not Candace Owens. Let me just say that. However, I think, statistically in 2045, America is projected to be a majority country.
Correct.
Right.
So when you talk about minority communities and women are considered to be that, I think that folds into that projection. Also, though, with the rise of STEM work and the push for jobs, specifically, science, technology, engineering, these are historically male-dominated industries. And they make up a majority of the actual workforce. So when you say the future is female, the future is a more diverse workplace, which includes females and people of color. And so, I say that to say you have the Chicago Fire Department. I don't know, how familiar you are all with the, I want to say maybe 2007 case, where it was a huge lawsuit for African-American males and a few females that didn't get into the hiring pool. Won the lawsuit, the folks who were awarded their jobs, they were able to bump some union folks around in terms of, so if the lawsuit went on 14 years, they came in automatically with 14 years seniority and the pension, right? So, folks were fuming. And then you had things like, the women finding human feces in their changing room spaces.
Wow.
And all alterations to their gear when they're going into to fight fires, and holes in their, clothes, and feces in their work boots. And
Wow.
you have that, right? So the fire departments historically have been male dominated. And if you take it a step further, it was traditionally white male dominated, right? And so what you're seeing is a change in the demographics in job groups that have historically been male, particularly white male. And when you think about the state of Black men, you think about the percentages of college graduates, the male to female ratio. When you see what the talent pool really looks like, women are dominating the talent pool from a workplace perspective based upon qualifications and education. So, when you talk about the future is her, based upon the projections now, the future is, which is why I believe from a grassroots level in our community, particularly, we have to be, you talk about that inclusion, we have to be intentional with how we prepare young people for, we have this whole thing. I don't care if it's a trade, if it's college, if it's entrepreneurialism, all of that. Our young people need all of that so that they have a wide array of choices in terms of how to have, a successful career in whatever it is they do. We're losing way too many young people. And at this stage, we're losing a lot of our young women as well to the streets.
So if the future is female, we need to put a distinction. She needs to be conscious. She needs to be competent. She needs to be courageous.
She is.
Yeah, that's what she is.
She's already.
Yeah,
and that's why.
And if she's not, then that's not the she we want.
Well, I mean, we do want it though. Wait, we're not dismissing right. The she hers that don't decide to go into corporate America.
No,
right.
What I'm saying, I'm just saying in general, if the future is female, I think it's important to bring distinction to who that female is, to Melissa's point. You get what I'm saying? So whether you're in the corporate space, the entrepreneurial space, whatever space it is.
But the reason I said that is because the reason we're saying the future is female is because the females are out here punching the game.
Right, I got what you're saying.
Based on sheer numbers. But the problem with that for us is that our community is not just she.
True.
Right? We've got to be intentional about how we're preparing our young people for the future to be Black. You understand?
Yes. So that brings us to the last question. And I'm going to start with you, Dawn, since you just alley-ooped yourself to go ahead. I'm going to let you, the ball is up. You pipping with one hand, you about to Jordan with the other. So let's go ahead and finish this, all right? Okay. So what do you say to young people of color, male and female, as it relates to what they need to understand? They're matriculating through high school, going into college, doing internships, getting ready for the corporate space, got their eyes on a C-suite. Give me 3 things at least that they need to grasp in order to not only secure a seat at the table, but have a sustainable seat at the table. What would you say to them?
So the first thing I would say is that we live with the choices that we make. So at every stage of the game, you're making a choice and setting up a building block for your future. My girl child is 13. She wanted an internship last year, even in the midst of COVID. She's working in an internship, or it's not internship, it's actually a paid camp counselor position. So when I said, what you're going to put on your resume? She said, I'm going to put on all of my accomplishments since the 3rd grade. Right? So it's empowering our kids. One, that's important for everyone. We as a community empower our children to motivate themselves. And so young people have to be motivated to make choices that they can ultimately live with all along the way. That's number 1. You live with the choices that you make. Number 2 is connecting yourself with a mentor at each stage of the game.
Oh, that's good.
You can have a spiritual mentor. You can have a professional mentor, to explore some of the things you might want to do. And for some kids who may not know they want to be a doctor at 8 years old, you understand? To explore as many opportunities as you can until you find something that lands with you. Right. So don't be afraid to explore and to take a name and number along the way. Find someone who shows you something that you want to see for yourself. It can be as materialistic as you want it to be, or it can be as deep as you want it to be. But we'll always have and need mentors along the way, whether you're 13, 23, or 40. Let me tell you that. If you have gumption, if you have drive, you should constantly be looking to expand your networking circles with positive sisters. And the third piece I would take away is always listen to the voice that's going to keep you grounded, albeit a parent, a grandparent, a Sunday school teacher. Find that person who can pray with you when you hear the things that we're talking about. And I'll give you this quick story. I have a friend who's a neurosurgeon. He's immaculately brilliant. And he called me 2 weeks ago to discuss a potential claim of race discrimination that he wants to file against the hospital system. So here he is at the top of the pecking order, and he's still being subjected to the things that we're talking about today, right? Can we get Jackson in the closet, please? Right. So I say that to say no matter how successful you are, you still have to deal with the minutia of what we're talking about. So
Right.
Find someone who can pray with, who can keep you grounded, and a good therapist.
There you go.
All right.
I would say for young people is to understand how powerful you really are. I think the quest, what I am reassured by this generation is they just ain't taking the okie doke. And
No.
I love that about them. So I want them to know that it's power in that, and to walk in that, and to explore that, and to develop that. And think about creating your own table. You know, why do you want to, what is so important for you to have a seat at that table?
Right.
What is it for you to explore and create your own table? Because when you pull up that seat, you still are amongst them, right? So look to create your own table. You know, and this is, I was talking to a girlfriend of mine. She was like, you know, a piece of advice that you gave me a long time ago, and it stuck with me, and it's very useful how I think about things now as a leader, is I said, you have to be okay with eating alone. So once you get to a particular level, once you have succeeded, I have found, you know, it's lonely at the top. And so you have to prepare yourself along your journey to say, if my trajectory is to be that EVP, is to be the CEO, the CHRO, whoever, am I going to be comfortable enough? Have I taken along the way enough of the resilience that I can eat alone? And so I think that you need to prepare yourself along your journey to ultimately eat alone. And then, like, what's your end goal? For me, you know, when I first started in corporate America, I wanted to be a trailblazer. Like, I wanted to be the next X, Y, and Z. And now for me, that focus has shifted to, I want to learn everything I can learn so I can tap out. Because things start to shift in your life, and you become like, I can't be the sacrificial lamb anymore. I'm going to learn what I'm going to learn, and then I am going to be a consultant at some point. But I think you have to start to, based on your experiences and what you have learned along the way, even as a young adult, you have to take that experience and start to understand what is your end goal and what is your game, and how you can utilize these organizations to get there, just like they're utilizing you to get where they need to go.
You all have shed some amazing light on this issue of
yes,
race
they have.
and the rat race. Thank you. Like Rick, every week just keeps like banging out.
This is amazing, man.
Quality. Yes, sir.
This is
And
absolutely.
we got to thank everybody that tunes in week after week. For those of you who have shared it, thank you. If you haven't yet, please hit the share button so somebody else in your circle of influence can be impacted. And some young person. You need to have your young people to watch this, to glean from this, to grow from this, so that they're adequately equipped and prepared to move into this future that we're preparing for. Listen, I need y'all to do me a favor. We want to celebrate our guests today. Encourage them. Their Cash App is on there. Holler at them. Drop something in there. Make them smile. Make them feel good. the black woman in corporate America is paid 57 cents for every dollar the white man is paid. So let's add some change.
Let's make up that difference. Yeah.
Let's make up the difference, at least for this week.
Yeah, at least for this week, if we can cover this week. And
Give them lunch.
Dawn and Melissa, thank you both for being incisive and insightful.
Yes.
You all literally represent what's best about sisterhood, about being a woman, period. And I appreciate, and thank you for being courageous. I know, Melissa, you know, you say you're not necessarily just seeking to be the trailblazer, but it seems like it's inherent in you. I don't think you can escape that. So,
Yeah, she did.
Yeah,
I tried.
so thank
She's
you for
right.
staying on the front line, and then Dawn, thank you for fighting. That means a lot, and we need that. We've got to have advocates and people that look like us, that understand us, that know us, that can translate for us, right? In those spaces and understand the nuances. So thank you all. Also, I want to make sure that people can connect with you all. You're both on IG, correct?
Yes.
Both on IG. Dawn is reluctant, but your stuff is out there now. So
I'm on Facebook. Yeah, I'm on Facebook.
Oh, you on Facebook? Okay.
Yeah.
So y'all are out there and connect with their Cash App. Thank you all again. We appreciate it. Stephen, episode 18, man.
Yeah.
So we need people to understand. I'm going to show you. You only got one more episode before we go to the group exclusively. So
Yes.
Here's what you got to do. If you're not a member of our Facebook group, which is The Revolution Will Not Be Televised, it will be live streamed. Join the group today, because after next Saturday,
That's it.
all of our content will be exclusively in the group. And then there's going to be other interactions. Once we go to the group, we're letting everything out the bag. I mean, it's going to be on and popping. So go ahead and join our group now. If you just start putting The Revolution, it'll fill in the rest. Answer the 4 questions. They're multiple choice. Don't come up
Real
in there just sending asking to be invited. Answer the 4 questions. If you don't answer the question, Stephen and I will reject you. Even if we know you, we just going to reject you on principle because you didn't take the time to answer the question. Answer those 4 questions, but join the group. You got one more week, because after next week, we out of here. We're only going to be in the group. Stephen, what you got going on during the week, man? I want to make sure that people connect with you. Of course, we're turning up with you for the rest of this weekend, because it is your birthday week. You deserve to turn up. So hit his Cash App. But what do you have going on moving forward? You just launched this Mirror Moments movement, man, and I've been checking it out. I mean, you're downloading some amazing stuff into people. So tell them about what's happening, how they can connect, how they can subscribe.
Sure. They can go to StephenThurston.com, click the link, the tab that says Mirror Moment Movement. There, they'll be able to join this subscription group on a monthly basis. They'll get content, relationship and leadership content, access to that. You'll get what I call a power pack. It's inclusive of a video teaching lesson, weekly inspirational or motivational email, an ebook, and an assessment and or assignment.
Man.
So this content is there to impact you, to equip you, to help you change what's within so that you can change what's around. So again, StephenThurston.com is where you can access that, plus everything else that I've made available for the people.
So he's adding value to your value. Go and get that. You can connect with me at RickyAllmon.org. I'm not waiting for Stephen because he want to just blow up my man. Look, let me make it simple. RickyAllmon.org. Go there. But there are 2 things I need you to do. I need you to text Ricky Allmon to 22828, because I've got some exciting updates that I want to give you. That's not for everybody. It's just for you. But in order for you to find out about it, I need you to text me so I can communicate with you and tell you what's getting ready to go down starting the first week of August. We're shifting up some formats on my personal platform for Life Talks that happens every Thursday night at 8:30 p.m. And we'll be switching the time up a little bit, switching up some content. So just text 22828 and text the word Ricky Allmon, and then go over to YouTube and join my YouTube channel, which is Ricky Allmon. So connect to that, and then you'll find out about everything else. if you make the connection. Lastly, I'll say it again, join our group today. The revolution will not be televised. It will be live streamed. I'm Ricky Allmon. My host is Stephen Thurston. We had two amazing corporate divas on with us, Melissa Jones, Dawn Smith. Thank you all again. This has been The Revolution Will Not Be Televised. It will be live streamed. Have a great weekend. I'll holla.
You too.